Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Nittany Lion Sports Report. Tonight, a Tuesday, to align ourselves with the college football playoff rankings. And boy, what a show that was, and very, very interesting the way everything came down. My name's Bob Long, alongside me, Tyler Gehlhaus, to talk about everything that went down in college football last week. Of course, the requisite college football playoff discussions, but also a discussion about the Penn State Nittany Lions ending their season, the regular season, on a high note, 10-2 with a 66-3 win against the Maryland Terrapins, a game, Tyler, that was the biggest win margin for Penn State against a Big Ten opponent in the program's history. Pretty unbelievable, and pretty telling about both how Penn State ended their season and where Maryland's program is right now. DJ Durkin doing a decent job to turn things around, but far from where they need to be.
Yeah, from a Maryland standpoint, I'll start off with them. They are on their third-string quarterback for the season.
Yep.
They had a good start to their season with a win over Texas on the road. Obviously, Texas isn't what they usually are. They do have a new coach, Tom Herman, but it was good first win for Maryland. They started off the season on a good note, and everyone knew it was going to be a tough transition from them to go to the ACC to the Big Ten East in football. The Big Ten East, arguably the toughest conference in all of college football. And they're just not where they need to be right now. Penn State probably had their best showing of the year. Granted, it was against a 4-8 or 5-7 Maryland team that was on their third-string quarterback. Nonetheless, it was a great performance by Penn State. McSorley played very well. Tommy Stevens played very well. Really, everybody played well from top to bottom. So a complete game for Penn State. 66-3 was the final, and now they wait to hear their fate on Sunday for who they'll be matched up in what's looking like a New Year's Six bowl game.
That's exactly right. We talked on the show a couple weeks ago about whether Penn State was going to be in the New Year's Six bowl game. Clearly, some of the pins dropped around them. Lots of teams fell off the map. Michigan State clearly got crushed the week after Penn State had lost to the Spartans, so that took them out of the discussion. All of a sudden, Penn State now looks to be possibly the second team out of the Big Ten. If Wisconsin were to beat Ohio State, that game starting at about 8 o'clock on Saturday night, and that will be Wisconsin Badgers at 12-0 and came in the last college football playoff rankings that you just saw on ESPN last hour, came in at the number 4 spot, behind 2-loss Auburn, which we'll talk about, against number 8 Ohio State, who has 2 losses as well. Most notably and most recently, a 31-point loss on the road against the Iowa Hawkeyes in the month of November. So we'll see whether Ohio State can shake all that off and continue the way they've played the last 3 weeks. But I think it's important we don't forget what happened 4 weeks ago when they got absolutely throttled on the road against Iowa.
Yeah, I think that's if Ohio State does win, we can talk playoffs a little bit later. If they do win, that is going to be, the black eye for a lot of people. The fact that they lost by 31 to Iowa, with winning the Big Ten, assuming they beat Wisconsin, that would give them a Big Ten championship. But they have two bad losses. The Oklahoma loss not as bad because it is Oklahoma, but that Iowa loss is as bad of a loss you will find really for any top 10 team.
Yeah, you could even argue Pittsburgh, I suppose, for Miami just coming this past weekend.
Right.
But they have an opportunity to turn that around, and it's not the stain of a second loss, right? If Ohio State had beaten Oklahoma and then lost in a fluke to Iowa and then goes through and wins the conference championship as a one-loss conference champion out of the Big Ten, I think it's an entirely different discussion. But the fact that we've never had a 2-loss team go to the college football playoff, Tyler. Not one time. And if a 2-loss Ohio State team were to be the first team in the college football playoff era to go to the college playoff with 2 losses, and that would be the team that lost by 31 points, that's your first 2-loss team, I think that's where the struggle comes in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if there is a team that would do it, unfortunately, it is Ohio State. They seem to always have the ball bounce the right way this time of year when it comes to the committee, dating all the way back to 2014 when they won a national championship. Last year, obviously, the ball, and I believe, bounced the right way for him again. Some people disagree with that, but it was very controversial.
At least they made good on their opportunity when they got there.
Exactly. I mean, they put up 0 points. I mean, they looked pretty good doing it. At least they went out in style for sure. But so I think that there is going to be a 2-loss team this year, and I think it's going to be the Auburn Tigers. I don't think it will be the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think not to say that they could they might make it, but I think Auburn has a much better chance to be that 2-loss team, as we saw in the rankings tonight, jumping in number 2.
Yep.
Pretty much Auburn, if they beat Georgia, they're in with that second loss. And I mean, they could even be a 1 seed with 2 losses,
which is pretty
believe
unbelievable.
It or not, they could.
Yeah, at the very least, they're likely wearing the dark blue uniforms, meaning that they are the higher seed of their matchup. So at the very least, they would be the number 2 seed. But you're right, with Clemson losing, and if Auburn were to beat Georgia, which is a third top 10 team in 4 weeks, without Clemson in front of them, I don't understand, or I wouldn't know how they wouldn't move them above Clemson at that point. My issue specifically with Auburn is why they're that high to begin with. And no doubt that if they win next week that they should be in. I mean, 100% that's the case. But you have a 12-0 Wisconsin team. 12-0. There's only 12 data points out there right now, and Wisconsin has 2 less tallies in the loss column coming from a Power 5 conference than Auburn. An SEC that people said were down this year. You look up and down the league, the West is better than the East, as it seemingly always is.
East is better than the West.
No, the West is
no,
for the
SEC.
SEC.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the Big Ten. I'm
talking
sorry.
Auburn now, right? The SEC is not what it has been in past years. Now, the West is better than the East in the SEC, but at the end of the day, it's not this juggernaut, my conference is better than your conference, Paul Feinbaum style SEC from a few years ago. This is a team, or a conference, that has 3 or 4 teams at the top. Auburn is very good. Alabama is clearly very good, even though they lost to Auburn. Georgia is very good. They have the 1 loss. It was really bad to Auburn. You look up and down their schedule, though, they didn't really have a ton of very, very difficult games on their schedule either. They did go out and schedule Notre Dame, which was appropriate and obviously will help their case if they were to win. But, LSU, they lost at home to Troy. Florida is obviously a joke. Not that all these teams played these teams, but Florida is way down a traditionally good power. Arkansas just fired their head coach.
Tennessee.
Texas A&M. Tennessee was atrocious. Texas A&M out of the West looked in week 1 like they were going to be a pretty darn good team. Then they blew a 25-point lead to UCLA. Their season's off the rails. It's not this juggernaut SEC where I say, well, yes, they have 2 losses, but man, they're out of the SEC. And I get that Auburn's playing well. So is Wisconsin, shutting out Minnesota and just walloping teams right now. They beat Michigan by more than Ohio State did, for whatever that's worth. I mean, so Wisconsin's playing pretty darn well also, and I think that gets lost in a 12 data point rally here. Auburn has 2 more losses and they're ranked ahead. I have a big problem with it.
And I mean, you have every right to have a problem with it, because if you're a Wisconsin fan, you're probably having a problem with it as well.
If you're Wisconsin, you want to be the number 1 overall team, so that if you lose this game, you should be having the same conversation as Alabama fans.
And it is incredibly hard to run the table, which is why right now it's only UCF and Wisconsin that are undefeated in Division I. With that being said, you look at the schedules, and I get what you're saying, but Auburn has 2 wins against top teams, number 1 when they played them, within the last 3 weeks, both at home, but they still won both of them. So, and they won both.
And they lost to a team that lost at home to Troy.
Right, and I guess but the thing is with that though, I think you could keep playing that game over and over again and saying, so and so beat them but lost them. So I guess it's where you draw the line. I definitely see where you're coming from, though. I think as an undefeated team, I think they're not being respected enough. Mm-hmm. But that's almost like that's almost like the norm for Wisconsin, I feel like.
Yep.
I feel like they're just always under the radar. Their coach gets them up to play. They don't have the athletes. They don't have the recruits that these other schools have, but they're a tough team. They're well coached. They don't make mistakes, and they do what it takes to win games in the end. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting matchup on Saturday night out in Indianapolis against Ohio State. But you're right. If it is, unfortunately for them, if they lose, they're out. So
can I pull up their schedule real quick? Show you here. This is Wisconsin. All right, this is not a great schedule, right? They have a Utah State team that is not very difficult. FAU, no. BYU, on the road at BYU. Yeah. Not a very good BYU team this year, but the intent with the schedule was to schedule a decent team out of conference. Northwestern.
That's a good win, Northwestern.
Good win.
And it's a good win for Penn State,
Nebraska,
too. I mean,
yeah.
But here's the thing. At the beginning of the year, at BYU was supposed to be better than people thought. At BYU was supposed to be better than people thought. Same with Nebraska. Can you go back to
yeah, I can.
Because even Nebraska on the road, that's not an easy place to play. And they weren't, obviously they were pretty bad this year, but nobody expected them to be that bad. And I mean, they took care of business against the other teams they need to take care of business. Now, if you would please go to Alabama.
Here we go. Here it is. The intent with BYU, right? We're saying that doesn't count because they're not that good. The intent is to schedule a decent team. Bang. Top game, the first game of the season for Alabama, Florida State, 24-7.
They're not that good, obviously.
They are not going to a bowl game. They don't have 6 wins. I don't really care what their ranking was because just like Wisconsin, and I get it, BYU is not Florida State and didn't have the expectations, but the intent was to schedule a quality team out of conference. It didn't work out. If we're not giving Wisconsin credit, we're not giving Alabama credit. Period. The end.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, the SEC bias seems like that might come into play a little bit. And like you said, that schedule is not any more impressive than the Wisconsin schedule by any means.
It's not. It's just not. It's really not.
And I don't understand. We talked about this a little bit.
Let's talk about how they're playing. Sorry, the last few weeks.
Mercer.
But
even
State
so, Mississippi State easily could have won that game.
Yep.
And then Auburn. I mean, Alabama really didn't look good at all in the second half of that football game.
Just the first drive.
Yeah, and I mean, they had back-to-back bad snaps that really cost them there in the third or fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't like your typical Alabama team at all.
So how's Wisconsin playing in the last few games? Oh, okay. Beat Michigan by more points than Ohio State did. Everybody's darling. Beat Iowa by 24 points. The week before, Ohio State lost to them by 31. Hammering Indiana, hammering Illinois, beating Minnesota 31-0. I mean, they haven't played many close games. This is a Wisconsin team that deserves to be in that 1 or 2 spot and still be in the discussion if they were to lose a close one against Ohio State. The unfortunate thing, Tyler, is it's just not going to happen.
I think it might, though, if they win against Ohio State. If they win.
Okay, I'm saying if they're a one-loss.
If they're a one-loss team, they're not.
They're not.
But they sliding into the 4-hole this week, it pretty much sums up that for them it's win or go home.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's still go to a nice New Year's Six bowl, but for the playoff chances, it's win or go home on Saturday for the Badgers.
And that's
as is for some other teams, but I can see your issue with it because as a Wisconsin fan, you're like, okay, we're 12-0, and Auburn's 10-2, and they're the 2 seed right now.
Yep, and we're hanging on for dear life.
Granted, if Auburn loses, they're also not going to the playoff.
Correct, we know that. Yeah, but I mean, it's a 3-loss team.
Pretty much, in my opinion, any of these teams lose in the top 4, none of them are going.
I would agree. I would agree. The only team that doesn't have to win this week is Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day.
They could slide into the 1 seed at the very end. They could.
Into the playoff.
Even the 1 seed, maybe.
How would you see that?
I mean, I think it would
Clemson
be.
loses,
So
Auburn
I think
loses,
it would be.
Oklahoma loses.
They would all have to lose.
Wisconsin.
So I think it could
happen. Yeah.
I think Miami would have. They don't strike me as a 1 seed, especially now if they show up with a different team and they beat Clemson. And obviously I think they're gonna. That's a semifinal game in my opinion, or a quarterfinal game. Winner goes to the semis. But if they want that loss to Pitt, also hurts. That's probably the second worst loss on the resume outside of Ohio State's loss to Iowa.
Yeah,
for the top 10.
Sure.
I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but
Who called that one, by the way?
good call,
Tell you
Bob.
what.
That was a good one.
That was back in late October.
Yeah, it was. I remember. But, well,
I thought it was
going to
be a little colder.
Because you were saying, though, that, like, Black Friday, hostile, sold-out environment in Heinz Field, and it would be
dressing like a yellow seat.
It would just be so, like, raucous that nobody would be Miami, not used to the cold, and the great fans of Pittsburgh. But all jokes aside, there are actually the quarterfinal games, as I'm calling them, even though they're championship games.
Mm-hmm.
I think that going into this week, I think that it's the SEC championship and the ACC championship might as well be quarterfinal matchups. If we could talk about that first game a little bit, the SEC game, it's on at 3:30, I believe, on Saturday.
Yep.
All right, so Auburn, who would you rather be going into this game right now? A team that got killed by Auburn in Georgia a couple weeks ago, looking for revenge, or Auburn coming in hot, but maybe without Kerryon Johnson, who
funny.
They said is probably going to play. They expect him to play, but you don't know that. And they also he goes out, and then their backup comes in. He goes out. So,
right.
And his injury looks to be pretty serious. I think it's a
Yep.
high ankle sprain, and as a running back, you're probably not playing regardless of position, but definitely running back.
No, it's funny you say that. I was just about to ask that question. We're on the same page. Is Kerryon Johnson in that lineup? Honestly, I'd rather be Auburn. I mean, Auburn's
momentum,
a better football team. I just think they're a better football team. You don't have a better set of running backs per se, but I think, have a better quarterback. You have a better set of lines, and you have a more experienced football team that I think is more ready to win right now. So if I have my druthers, I'm Auburn going into this game with all the momentum in the world and with the number 2 ranking. I just think that's a good football team right now, Tyler, and I would be them if I could be. Well, that's a great question. Not just Auburn or Georgia. Who would you most like to be sitting with which matchup? I think my answer would be Clemson because of how little I think of Miami, which is why I picked Pitt to beat them.
Right.
Back in October.
I don't think that much of Miami either.
Yeah, I'd most like to be Clemson if I could be anybody in the top 10 right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because I think they probably have no disrespect to Miami, but looking at the championship matchups for the Power 5 this week, I think that Miami, that would be. I'd want to be in Clemson's shoes too, because I think you're already the 1 seed. All you have to do is win. I think you're 9.5-point favorites. Win, and you're the 1 seed, and that gets them a game at the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, which isn't too far from South Carolina. It's better than flying cross country to the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
So I mean, I think I would love to be Clemson in this situation. I don't see how an experienced team like that that's clicking right now chokes against Miami, who just came off of a loss at Pitt. I don't see it.
They could play it close, though. 45-37 last year, if I remember the score correctly, against Virginia Tech, a upstart team that was in the ACC championship last year.
Came back, right?
Yeah. Almost was able to push that game to overtime if they could have gotten a late score and a 2-point conversion. But I don't think that Kelly Bryant and this team are going to lose this game. I think they'll win. I think they'll be the number 1 overall seed. As I mentioned, I have my issues with that. Say what you want about Wisconsin's schedule, but they didn't lose any games to a 4-8 team. They didn't lose any games, period. I mean, listen, we can take a look at the Clemson schedule as well here, Tyler, the top team here. Here's what they're saying about Clemson. They're saying that Clemson has the 7 or 8 wins over teams that are over 500. And that is it's a really nice blanket statement to make. But Auburn, that's a phenomenal win. Louisville, that's an okay win. I mean, that's an okay. It's a decent win. BC, not a good win. Virginia Tech, an okay win. Wake Forest,
that's a good win.
nothing.
I think on the road at VT at night. I think it's. But here's the problem that I have.
NC State's a good win.
Here's the problem I have with this, Bob. Do they look? Maybe do you look at it as a good win? Is it what the team is ranked when you beat them, or what they are ranked now?
I think it's what they're ranked now. Otherwise, we'd be saying Alabama has a top 5 victory on their resume, which they clearly do not.
But the problem is when you beat these teams, they're obviously going to drop. You know what I mean, though? Because
yeah, I do, but they have 11 other data points.
So when they played Virginia Tech was 12, and now they're what, 23? And granted, other things have happened.
Mm-hmm.
They have slid off a little bit, Virginia Tech, but that's always something. It's like, well, you're going to beat that team when they're ranked 10. If you beat them, they're going to slide back a few spots. You know what I mean? So, but you look at it more of what they finish up at.
I do.
Okay.
I do, because I think everybody has to go through that. You know, and especially with Louisville. I mean, Louisville's unranked. Louisville was just overranked at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and that's another thing about preseason rankings, like we talked about with Florida State.
Florida State. Listen, they beat the same Florida State team that Alabama beat by the same number of points. Why should Alabama get the credit for Florida State being number 3 and Clemson not get any credit here? Because
I guess because Francois played a half.
Well, there you go.
I mean, that's the only thing I could think of there.
Yeah, and I think the answer is that there's no reason that
Right.
Alabama should get credit for that win when Clemson, who has a win over that same team by the same amount of points, beat a Florida State team now that is unranked and struggling to get to 6 wins. So, now for those of you that are watching us on Facebook Live, feel free to comment. We got Tyler manning the boards here. So again, on Facebook Live, comment. You can even text us in at the number 215-622-7239. Text boards are open, 215-622-7239. We want your thoughts because this is absolute madness going on right now. And I know some people like the rankings. I'm actually okay with them except for the 2 issues that I mentioned. Well, actually, I've only mentioned one of those issues, the Auburn being up at number 2. I had them at number 4. My top 11, we'll say, was Clemson, Oklahoma, Wisconsin. Although if it's my druthers, I was kind of guessing what they would do. If it's my druthers, it's Wisconsin number 1, Oklahoma number 2, Clemson number 3, Auburn number 4, Alabama 5, Georgia 6, Miami 7, Ohio State 8. TCU. That's where I have TCU coming in. Right at 9. I think they should have and maybe would. I thought they would have slid ahead of Penn State, not necessarily because of anything they did, but because when you put them at 11 right now, the committee is either going to not give them a shot if they beat Oklahoma, which they absolutely would deserve if they win that, at or above Ohio State. But you can just throw away everything this committee does and say nothing matters leading up to the final rankings, which technically they don't. But if they move TCU from 11 to 4 based on a close victory against Oklahoma, which they should be ranked above Oklahoma if they beat them, then I don't think this means anything. So I would have put TCU at 9 to put them in the discussion.
So do you not – you said that you don't think that these rankings tonight mean anything?
If TCU were to seriously threaten or challenge – for the conference championship game. If you're seriously going to tell me that putting a TCU team a spot below Southern Cal, and assuming this Southern Cal team were to beat Stanford and TCU were to beat Oklahoma, which it's definitely a better win for TCU beating Oklahoma. There's no doubt about that. Stanford, solid team, 9 wins. If that were to move TCU over USC, Penn State, Ohio State, let's say Alabama, and then maybe even the winner of Wisconsin and Ohio State. If that were Ohio State, I just think that would be nuts. I also think it would be nuts for Oklahoma to lose to TCU in a close game and somehow Ohio State were to sneak in over both Oklahoma and TCU, which would be the Big 12's worst nightmare. It would be a recycle of 2014, except for the fact that this time the Big 12 would draw the short straw because of a conference championship game as opposed to 2014 where they drew the short straw because they did not have one. Lot to chew on there.
All right, so we actually have a pretty good question right now from Max Petrosky. Not sure if I said that right. Sorry, Max.
Max does a lot of good stuff up with Penn State.
Okay.
He does photography.
How do you say his last name?
Petrosky.
Petrosky. Okay. He said, not sure if you talked about this yet, but does an Ohio State blowout win against Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship help their playoff chances?
Yeah, does it help? Absolutely. Is it enough?
Yeah,
right?
so a couple years ago, 2014, we saw that it was enough, and it did help. They won 59-0
with a new quarterback.
Cardale
Jones.
That was against Wisconsin, right?
It was.
So I'll let you go ahead. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
That should not put Ohio State into the college football playoff. I just don't think, right? And I've said this before, and I think some Penn State folks got on me last year. We weren't doing this show in this format, but I went on the air and I said, I think Ohio State deserves it over Penn State. Why? 13 data points. For Ohio State, it was 12, and I get that. But going into that 13th data point, Penn State had the one discrete additional loss. And I think that means something. I think that means something here, too. Alabama, a good team, and I think they have a good resume. Not a necessarily overly strong resume, but a team with just the one loss to a team that, let's say, Clemson does lose and Auburn goes to the number 1 overall seed, right? All of a sudden you have a loss on the road by 2 possessions to the number 1 overall team in the country. You know, Ohio State has a 31-point loss to Iowa. That's what I keep getting hung up on. I just don't know how you possibly justify that. And maybe I'm a bigger critic of losses than I am of wins. I don't get Clemson and how they've gotten a free pass for Syracuse. I don't get Ohio State and how they are building the bridge for a possible free pass for a 31-point loss on the road at Iowa in November, 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, well,
I just don't see it.
And I think the answer is, to be frank with you, it's because they're Ohio State. It's their brand, similar to what we see with Alabama. It's
the same reason they're talking about Southern Cal right now.
Yeah, it's just so funny to me because I can't get that Iowa game out of my head too. And even against Michigan, I mean, if Michigan had a quarterback that could actually throw the ball, I mean, Michigan could very well win that game. I mean, I don't know. That's a whole different subject that they can't find a quarterback that can throw the ball. But Michigan was in that game. They shot themselves in the foot a bunch of times. And, I mean, for the first quarter, I mean, they're up 14-0. It's like, holy mackerel. And then J.T. Barrett gets hurt, and Dwayne Haskins comes in, does a great job, by the way. But I still I mean, I don't know. I still don't. I mean, like you said earlier, Wisconsin beat Michigan by more than what Ohio State beat them, and Penn State beat Michigan more by what those two teams beat them combined. Right. But that doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't at this point. But
different venues
I don't
for
know.
a few of those games.
Different venues, right? But if there's a team that's going to get in there somehow by luck and for the ball bouncing the right way, don't be surprised, Max, if it is Ohio State.
Now, I texted you when Alabama, I think I texted you after Alabama lost, that I thought that was the death knell for Ohio State. In my estimation, the way for Ohio State to get in was last week for Alabama to beat Auburn. Auburn's done. Alabama to then beat Georgia this week. Georgia's done. So imagine the picture in this case. Let's say Alabama's number 1, Clemson's number 2, Oklahoma's number 3. Number 4 right now would be Wisconsin. Georgia with the loss would be gone. Miami with the loss to Clemson would be gone. And now you're looking at TCU now gone. Penn State is not going to be below Ohio State. I'm sorry, not going to be above Ohio State unless Ohio State were to lose. And obviously, for this to even happen, Ohio State would need to win. So Penn State would continue to be below Ohio State. I think they would have to slide into that 4th spot. But since Alabama lost, they are that immovable object now that's sitting there idle with 1 loss. And I just can't get there. I just can't get there where Ohio State would deserve it over Alabama. Alabama's 1 loss being to maybe the number 1 team in the country and clearly the hottest team in the country. You know, if you're going to put if you're going to put Alabama in there over Ohio State as well, I also think, but we won't see it, like I said at the top of the show, Wisconsin should be in the same discussion. I mean,
if they lose?
If they lose to Ohio State.
That's actually, Max asked another question. He says, do you think Wisconsin holds on to a spot with a tough loss, close loss to Ohio State? I don't think so because of where the committee slotted them this week at 4. I think if they were at 2, 1 or 2, even 2. I think
Yeah.
maybe with a close loss, but I think Max with number 4, I think that's showing that, we still don't respect you.
Yep.
And you better win on Saturday or else you're going home.
I just want to do this one more time. You got this schedule for Wisconsin, right? So you have BYU. You tried to get a tough matchup
and I mean,
in the
that's
non-conference.
that's going out west.
Scheduling somebody.
That's going out west early in the season against a team that's recently been above average.
Exactly.
LSU played them too to start their season. So,
So if you're not giving them credit for that, do not give Alabama credit for this. Now, I don't know if that helps my argument or not. That might help the Ohio State argument, and I totally get that. But let's take a quick look at the Buckeyes here as well, right? So they schedule UNLV, Army, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma, it's a good schedule, but they looked atrocious. I mean, they looked atrocious. They looked worse than a 14-point loss in that game. Iowa, they looked as bad as you could possibly look. Michigan State, and I've said this from the very beginning. Well, not the beginning of the season, but from the first opportunity we've had to say it. Penn State losing to Michigan State has helped Ohio State's resume significantly because Michigan State would have been a low 20s to unranked if Penn State had just taken care of business there. They probably would have been unranked when Ohio State played them. So the 48-3 is just 48-3 against a half-decent team. Instead, Michigan State beats Penn State. Everybody thinks Michigan State's this new darling. All they need to do is beat Ohio State, and they represent the East, and they lay a dud. So now that win looks awesome, where it might not be that awesome.
I have such a problem with that because Penn State's coming off of a heartbreaking, emotional, hard-fought loss the week prior to at Ohio State. Then they go right into East Lansing against a ranked Michigan State team on the road, and then you have a 3.5, 4-hour weather delay.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and then Michigan State obviously pulls out the win, and then they go to Ohio State. That's why I don't like the comparing, because you never know what went on that game. Extreme circumstances like a weather delay doesn't show up in the in the box score really, and also when you play a team is crucial. I mean, it really is. As you've seen with Penn State coming off of byes, they've been under James Franklin have done very well coming off of a bye, leading into a big game, whereas Ohio State had a bye before Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
And then Michigan State goes to Ohio State after they had a hard-fought battle with Penn State the week before, and then they go out to Ohio State and lay an egg. So I think a lot of it depends on where the game's played, when the game is played, what time of year, and how the schedule stacks up. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Now, could Ohio State fans say the same thing? Well, we just came off a very emotional win against Penn State. We just laid an egg at Iowa. Yes, but you gave up 55 points. That's different than losing 27-24.
And we all know Iowa is not an easy place to play. Penn State found that out in September in the first Big Ten game. They pulled it out. It wasn't easy. But, yeah, and I mean, what was their excuse that they had an emotional game against Indiana before they played Oklahoma? I mean, Indiana gave them a battle for sure, but
shouldn't have been a battle.
No, and they didn't look good against Oklahoma. They looked horrible in their 2 losses this year. I know you will too, but if they somehow get in, I'm gonna have a really tough time accepting the facts there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
I think not to interrupt, but Alabama sitting at 5 right now. It just, to me, it seems like they're just waiting for one of those teams above them to drop, and they'll slide right in. At least that's how I view the rankings from this week.
Who's going to slide in? Bama?
I think if one of the top 4 teams well, it depends who they lose to. If Oklahoma or Wisconsin lose, I expect Alabama to slide in. Where it gets tricky is if both those teams lose.
Yeah. It's interesting. Now, with Ohio State, for years now, this is 4 years that they've had these rankings. They've been in and around the playoff every single time. 2014, they were the 6th seed, the 6th ranked team going into that final week. They beat Wisconsin 59-0. In the meantime, Baylor takes care of Kansas State, a decent Kansas State team that year, and a team that TCU had already cleaned up on. TCU beats Iowa State 55-3. Remember, back in those days, the Big 12 were playing games into that weekend. They had an extra bye so that they would be playing during championship week, but because they only had 10 teams, the conference didn't have a championship game. So TCU, who had moved up from 4 to 3 over Florida State, that undefeated Florida State team, the committee made a statement for that penultimate ranking show, putting TCU, because of their resume, because their one loss was when they had a 21-point lead in the fourth quarter against Baylor, and there was a bad defensive pass interference call led to Baylor winning the game. So then TCU goes and wins by 52 points. They get dropped from 3 to 6 as Ohio State blows out Wisconsin. Ohio State sneaks in as the 4 seed, ends up winning the national championship. 2015, Ohio State loses a tough one to Michigan State. Then Michigan State goes and beats Iowa by 1 possession in a really tough, just really, really physical Big Ten championship game. Michigan State gets in as a 4 seed. Ohio State likely would have been that next team at number 5. You just can't put them in that year. But then 2016, we all know what happened. They're the number 3 overall seed. They have the 1 loss. Didn't even win the conference, the Eastern Division of the Big Ten Conference. But they go. I thought I agreed with it. They lay an egg. Now they're the 2-loss team, granted with a little bit of a better non-conference resume than 2-loss Penn State had last year. And certainly a better non-conference resume last year than Alabama has now. But you just have 2 sides of the cards, and you have Ohio State if they were to go again, Tyler. I just think that's the issue, is that people are seeing Ohio State coming down on so many different sides of this coin, and that's the frustration.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point about that, because I think Ohio State might kind of get a taste of what Penn State had last year.
Mm-hmm.
2 losses, conference championship if they win on Saturday against Wisconsin, like Penn State, and then still being left out, and possibly taking their spot would be 1-loss Alabama, who this year would play the role of Ohio State last year in
Right.
many ways, and the scripts would just be flipped a little bit. So, I guess as long as the playoff committee stays consistent, I think that's all that matters, and I guess we're really going to see that if there are obviously. There's going to be 2 teams that they really have to pick from, because 2 of the games are going to decide themselves.
All right.
And maybe the Wisconsin if they win. So,
well, let's have some fun here. We're talking about all these 2-loss teams, and I think Auburn deserves it. But you have an Alabama team with the 1 loss and hasn't looked impressive the last few weeks. You have Ohio State with 2 losses, and you almost feel like they're backing in because maybe there's nobody else there to get it. And all the while, this team, Tyler, just sits out there undefeated. UCF. Why not? Why not this year?
well, I mean, they finally play a ranked team this week in Memphis.
Yep.
They're not Power 5. You're never. I shouldn't say never, but anytime soon, as long as it's a 4-team playoff.
They beat a Power 5 Maryland team, which is not a big deal, but they beat them by 28 points. They beat Navy by 10. There's not much there.
I know. I give them credit for what they've done. Scott Frost has done an amazing job. It'll be interesting to see how long he's there, or before he gets hired at Nebraska, maybe. But
they don't deserve here.
No, they don't, because if there were 8 teams, I think they'd have a chance. I do. With 4, no chance. Nope.
So you have an Ohio State team that I don't
Where
necessarily.
were they in the rankings this week? UCF.
They were number. What were they? I forget.
I'll pull it up.
I forget what they were. It wasn't in any spot to make a run. They were not in any spot. I just say that because you have teams that, we're struggling to figure out why these teams deserve it. We have more reasons why they don't deserve it than why they do.
1 second. I'll find it.
And that's the issue.
Bob, what was the farthest jump from this week's rank, the final regular season rankings, to the final college football rankings? So was it 6-4 with
Ohio State?
Is that the largest jump?
Might have been
6-4.
I don't know that answer.
Because last year Penn State went from 8-5 after winning.
Right.
So I'm just trying to think like what the largest jump ever was. And I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Or you could guess and you could possibly be wrong.
UCF is actually 14.
14. I mean, they're in no spot. It's just
they're not even in a spot for number if they did an 18.
Right. But if we're really trying hard to figure out why these teams might deserve it when it looks like they don't, throw somebody in there like UCF. It'll never happen. It's a pipe dream, and I'm usually not a small conference guy. I mean, for those of you guys that have been following me forever, I had huge issues with Boise State and their national championship discussions. Now, I think that's a little bit different because the BCS used to pick 2 teams. This is 4. I think you can find an SEC championship winner and an ACC championship winner that deserves it. I think if Wisconsin wins, they deserve it. If Oklahoma wins, they deserve it. You know, does a 2-loss TCU, does a 2-loss Ohio State, and does a 2-loss Clemson or Oklahoma who are trying to back into something, do they really deserve it? I mean, if we have 2 or 3 deserving teams, why not give it to an undefeated UCF? It's not down to 2 teams. That's, I think, the big difference for me. You got these teams backing into it. Why not? And it'll never happen, but that's why I asked the question. Why not?
Can we do a little bit of can we do Power 5 play conference championship predictions while we're at it?
Let's do it.
All right.
And again, for the folks that are on Facebook Live, thoughts on any of these games, thoughts on any of the
send in your
rankings.
predictions or your reasoning as to why you think that so-and-so might beat win their conference championship and where that puts them in the playoff picture. And then we can discuss that. So we'll start off. Do you want to start off with the SEC?
Sure.
All right, Auburn, Georgia.
Give me Auburn by 14 points. I think Auburn keeps rolling the train. Kerryon Johnson, I certainly hope that he's healthy. This is saying a lot. He could be, I don't know, the most dangerous back out there. Is that crazy to say? The way he's playing right now?
He might be. He's definitely making a name for himself now.
In this game, in this 60-minute period, he could be the most dangerous back out there. And I think Jared Stidham's playing a lot better.
And obviously Georgia has many good running backs over there on their side of the ball. I think that going into this game, I think it's going to be a lot closer, and that's not saying much because it was 41-17 the first time they played.
Yeah,
but it's going to be closer because it's the SEC championship. Okay, Georgia got embarrassed last time. They're coming out with something to prove. I mean, this is a quarterfinal game. This is winner goes to the college football playoff, and I think that Auburn will win. I think they'll win by a touchdown. And I think that'll put them in position, and I think they'll go into the college football playoff as the 2 seed.
Okay.
Right where they started this week.
So let's go ACC then, because this is what we haven't discussed. I think we both agree, but Miami wins, they're in, yes. Clemson loses, they're out, yes.
Winner, just like the SEC, winner goes.
Even though Miami is 7, Clemson is number 1.
I think that they'd be able to jump from 7 to 4.
Yeah, you'd have to jump them over Clemson, right?
Because, I mean, you saw how far Auburn jumped
2 weeks ago
for beating the number 1 team. 2 times, really.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously they value beating the number 1 team like you should. So,
yep.
You would have to think Miami would definitely, despite the loss to Pitt, they would jump. I don't see it though. I think Clemson's rolling. I think Clemson's going to win. I think they're going to win by at least 2 touchdowns, maybe
Agreed.
more. I think that the experience factor, the just being there, they've played in this game almost every year. It seems like in the recent years, and they're clicking. Their defense is one of the best in the country. They can run the ball. Kelly Bryant can go over the top. I mean, they can do a lot, and I think that they're going to win by more than 2 touchdowns. And I think they're going to solidify themselves as the number 1 seed. And they're going to play. We'll get to that soon, but they're going to play in a pretty close game for them in the Sugar Bowl.
Okay.
So I think Clemson goes in as a 1, Auburn goes in as a 2.
Let me be as clear as I possibly can. Give me that other camera, and we'll have it so that folks can have me for a good screenshot when I'm absolutely wrong about this. But Miami is not very good. Miami's not a good football team. They're going to get waxed. They're going to get waxed in the ACC.
What's that say about Notre Dame?
I don't know. I mean, that they fell apart at the end.
Okay.
They
even against obviously they fell apart against Miami, and they didn't look very good against Stanford either.
Yeah.
So I know Notre Dame was up there as high as number 3, I believe, in the poll at one point.
Right.
So
looked like they deserved it too.
It did. At the time. It really did.
That was embarrassing against Miami. I mean, absolutely embarrassing.
Yeah, it was bad. Okay, so we both agree on the SEC and ACC championships. Let's go to the Pac-12. This is kind of meaningless. Well, for playoff purposes,
or so we think.
Unless USC somehow, again, 2 losses. They're going up against Stanford Friday night. Friday night it is.
They get
so if you're looking for something to do on
time,
Friday night, I believe
lone
it's at
slot?
Levi Stadium, home of the NFL best San Fran 49ers.
There you go. Big-time home crowd for Stanford. You love that, although they can't even get people
They can't even
to
fill
their
home
home
stadium on Saturday night against Notre Dame. That was
We're on the same page.
Yeah, we are. We definitely are on the same page.
I like Southern Cal.
And those teams played before, right? This year? Did they or no? I don't know if they did, actually.
Let's see. I actually don't know that answer, Tyler.
You're
You're stumping me. You're stumping me. I'm also
They
stumped
did. No,
as
they
to
did.
where-
They played week 3. 2.
2. Yeah. USC. That's exactly right. I remember that game. Yeah, the running backs went off in that game. That was when they looked the best of the entire year. I mean, that was their most impressive game of the entire year. So, okay. But I like Southern Cal.
Yeah, I do too.
I really hate to say it because people are going to start talking about them on Sunday morning. They don't deserve it.
No, they don't.
In fact,
they had their chances, just like Penn State had their chances.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's
and
take another
both
look.
teams couldn't take advantage of their chances.
Now, they were banged up against Washington State. Notre Dame there's no excuse for that. And the fact that Notre Dame just
that loss
fell
looks
apart,
even worse now.
They fell apart. Doesn't matter where that game was played. I totally understand that it's in South Bend. Means nothing. I mean, that should disqualify you on your own. But you know what? They're talking about Iowa after they beat Ohio State. They're still talking about the Buckeyes. So what do I know about anything?
I think USC will win. I think by about 10.
I think they'll win as well. I like Stanford, though.
And Stanford's a good team, well coached.
Could totally see them winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to
Absolutely.
be. I think USC just has better players, and at the end of the day, I think that's the quarterback position. I think that's what it'll take to win that game. Not that Sam Darnold's had the year that we maybe thought he would have going into it, but he's still a top echelon quarterback. But I don't think that's enough for USC to get into the college football playoff. They are looking at a New Year's Six bowl. As to is Penn State, and we can talk upon their matchups maybe after we do this segment here.
Yeah, we got a good graphic here as well to show all those championship games. Pac-12, you said Levi Stadium, 8:00 Friday. What else? What do we not talk about yet?
Let's go Big 12.
All right, let's do it.
Big 12.
You first.
Big 12, we have Oklahoma versus TCU in Jerry's World. Oh, wow, that's a 12:30?
Yep.
Ooh,
Early
I
kick.
like it. That gives me something to watch early in the day. I had no idea that was at 12:30 on Fox. Nice. At home of the Dallas Cowboys, we got Oklahoma against TCU. Oklahoma won the first time in Norman. What was the score of that game?
38-20, wasn't it?
30. I can't even remember. I do know Oklahoma won.
Because it was 38-3 at half, if I remember correctly. Let's go to the TCU schedule.
They lost.
38-20.
Okay. I think that Oklahoma is going to win this game again. It's going to be a lot closer than that, I believe. I'm going to say Oklahoma is going to win by 4 points.
All right. Now, the other thing to remember about that game, Tyler, is that Oklahoma team parked the bus. And I mean parked the bus. Didn't show anything on offense. Was running down the play clock. They never do that. We're running the ball a lot of times. They don't always do that. They parked the bus so that they didn't, because they knew they were going to play TCU again.
Now you're making me want to take Oklahoma more.
I'm going to take Oklahoma big. I think that's a really good football team right now. Again, maybe making Ohio State's case a little bit better. But they are rolling, and I think they win by 20 points.
Wow. Yeah, I'm kind of regretting my decision, but I'll stick with it. I'll
right.
stick with Oklahoma by 4.
Maybe
doubt TCU
Gary
gets
Patterson.
a couple late touchdowns to make it close.
Gary Patterson, man.
Yeah, and I mean, so I think with that being said, I think Oklahoma slides into the 3 hole where they actually are now. So right now, I have the same 1, 2, and 3 as the College Football Committee just released no more than an hour ago.
Which are Clemson, Oklahoma, and
Auburn.
Clemson, Auburn.
Not that matters because it's a 2 versus it's what jersey you're wearing.
Right. Okay.
And then the final game of the night, I believe that is the final game of the night as well. What time is the Big Ten kickoff?
Big Ten, 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. ACC is 8 o'clock as well.
Coincidental with the ACC.
From Lucas Oil Stadium, Bob and I both had the privilege to go out to that game last year for Penn State, Wisconsin. Amazing trip. Hopefully they get back there soon. I expect that they will. And for those listening that have not been there for the championship game, you should definitely make it a priority at least once to get out there. It's a tremendous time. I think that so we have Ohio State, Wisconsin, and I think that Ohio State is going to win a close one. We'll say by a touchdown or less. And I think that's going to put Ohio State up to 5, and I think it slides Alabama into the 4th slot for the playoff, leaving Alabama versus Clemson hosting Alabama at the Sugar Bowl, and Auburn hosting Oklahoma out at the Rose Bowl.
Okay. All right, give me that camera one more time. Pull on my interleague Corso. On Wisconsin, Bucky the Badger. Let's see it. Bucky the Badger. I
hope you're right. I really hope you're right.
Wisconsin wins the game by 7 points. I think Wisconsin is a really good running team. You're going to see Akram Wadley gave Ohio State, a little bit of trouble in that 55-point game. We look back and we think about Saquon Barkley and how much he struggled. Give Jonathan Taylor the football. Alex Hornibrook does just enough. You got some big corn-fed guys on the offensive line. They're going to keep Ohio State out of the backfield much better than Penn State did. I think they win the game.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I do. So that puts us – where does that put – so that puts you with Wisconsin at the 4 for the final playoff?
I mean, they'd be my number 1 overall seed. But what do I think they will do? I think it's chalk this weekend. Clemson number 1, Auburn number 2, Oklahoma number 3, and then Wisconsin number 4. Alabama is on the way out.
I think that's good for college football. I think it's good to get other teams in there. Alabama's had their time, and it's not that they're going anywhere. It's just not this year, in your opinion. And I think that they're going to get in because I think Wisconsin's going to lose to Ohio State. That doesn't mean Alabama's going to win a national championship. What a game that would be, though.
A rematch of the national championship.
Clemson, Alabama in a semi.
Wow.
Like
that.
In New Orleans, which is pretty close to both teams.
Yep.
So you have to know if both fan bases would be.
I love that other matchup, too.
Both really good matchups. I mean,
Auburn's defense against that Oklahoma offense, bring it on. I mean, I'll take it.
That would be great. And while we're talking matchups, Penn State, where do we see Penn State going? Last week we thought Penn State Notre Dame Cotton Bowl looked like a pretty fair bet.
Yep.
Obviously, Notre Dame no longer will be going to a New Year's Six game with another loss coming in at the hands of Stanford. Who do you see Penn State playing?
Mm-hmm.
And what bowl game do you see them in?
So, the Orange Bowl would be tough because it's the highest non-playoff team, the highest-ranked non-playoff team from the Big Ten or the SEC.
So it could be Wisconsin or Alabama.
Right. I think in another life, Notre Dame is also included in that discussion, but they're not in that discussion this year. So Big Ten, SEC, Notre Dame. So if Wisconsin were to win the game, if Wisconsin were to win the game against Ohio State, if Alabama were to sneak in maybe with an Oklahoma loss, that would be the way.
That would get Penn State to the Orange Bowl.
That's exactly right.
Penn State goes to the Orange Bowl if
Wisconsin wins.
And Oklahoma loses.
That's exactly. And somehow Alabama and Auburn have to get in.
And who's the other team that would go to the Orange Bowl? The best ACC team that's not in the playoff. Correct?
Right. So that could be Miami or Clemson.
Miami, good chance Miami has a home bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not necessarily home.
I don't know if they can play at the Orange Bowl.
Can they?
I don't think
I don't know. That's something.
Because it's at Hard Rock.
It is at Hard Rock, and
I don't believe they can go, actually.
Interesting.
So at that point, maybe they would play the next SEC team, Georgia or something like that.
I thought I saw something today, though, about somebody on ESPN was projecting them to go to that bowl game.
Miami?
I can pull it up, but
okay. while you do that, the other games, the Cotton Bowl, essentially it's an at-large, right? There's not really any type of there's no pull in terms of, say, the Rose Bowl, looking at the Big Ten against the Pac-12. Now, clearly, this year that takes on a whole new concept. So USC or Stanford, if they're not going to the college football playoff, probably going to the Fiesta Bowl. That is another opportunity for Penn State. There's thoughts that it could be Southern Cal against Penn State in a rematch if the bowl makers would allow it.
Miami can go to the
They can.
Orange Bowl. They have them right now playing Alabama in that game. Right now, ESPN has Penn State
probably going
playing in the Cotton Bowl against TCU.
Okay, it's not a bad matchup. There's a chance they could end up in the Fiesta Bowl as well.
Right now, they have Fiesta, USC, Ohio State.
Yeah, right. But that would be assuming
a lot of things are going to change.
But Ohio State, if they were to lose to Wisconsin, would fall below Penn State. There's a possibility.
What's the pecking order for those bowl games? Do you know?
I don't.
I do not. I know that there's also the Peach Bowl, and right now they have that as UCF Georgia. So I'm not really sure how those games. I think that they're going to go to the Cotton Bowl.
Now the thought would be, because I think the Fiesta has the priority over the Cotton Bowl. The thought would be maybe if Stanford were to win the Pac-12, Penn State would have a better shot of going to the Fiesta Bowl. Because at that point, you don't have a rematch of last year's bowl matchup. If USC wins, maybe they do head to the Cotton Bowl because the bowl committee doesn't want to have that rematch.
Are one of those games better than the other to you? I'm saying Cotton, Fiesta, Orange, and Peach Bowl. Those New Year's Six.
Just traditionally, Orange and Fiesta would have been the two bowls that are more important.
Okay.
Cotton has a great reputation. Peach, not really as much.
Peach is New Year's Day at 12:30. That to me, that's kind of like probably the lesser of the four.
Okay.
And it looks like you might be playing UCF,
right?
Which is like kind of like a lose-lose situation.
Think about this, by the way, and I get that all these games are in the South, but you could be playing Southern Cal in the Fiesta Bowl, or Texas Christian in the Cotton Bowl
after they just played there this week,
right? Or UCF
or
Miami
in their
the
home
Orange
stadium.
Bowl.
Yeah.
You know, Peach Bowl. You could have you could have UCF in the Cotton or in the Peach Bowl, which again is not far. Penn State doesn't win out here. It's not like all right, Penn State, Miami in the Fiesta Bowl like in 1994 where both teams are flying across the country. It seems like it's going to be Penn State flying south against a regional.
Yeah, and
team.
I mean, but I think that the way Penn State fans travel in terms of a, home field advantage. Penn State fans travel. You know that. Everybody knows that. So as far as that concern, that's not much of a concern. I get the traveling part. I'd like to see Penn State play Alabama. I think that'd be pretty cool.
I do too.
I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it'd be pretty cool. Right now, I think they're going to go to the Cotton Bowl. Does TCU get in the Cotton Bowl with 3 losses, you think?
They might not. They might not, but who would? Not the Pokes.
That's definitely not. Does it have to be a Big 12 team?
I don't think so.
I mean, I would like to see like a Cotton Bowl, even like if Georgia loses, I would like to see like Penn State, Georgia in the Cotton, but it looks like if Georgia loses, they're going to go to the Peach Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like to see him play Georgia. But
does that remind you of that Georgia-Hawaii game from a long time ago?
Yeah, and I don't know. We just played – Penn State played Georgia 2 years ago, too. In the
TechSlayer.com.
Granted, the teams are totally different from when they played that game.
Although it was Trace McSorley's debut.
It was. At least the second half of it was.
Yep.
I don't know. So I think it is looking like it might be a TCU. I mean, that'd be a good game, though. It would have been Notre Dame if they beat Stanford.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
And I also think the Orange Bowl against Miami would be pretty cool as well.
Yeah, it would be cool.
I mean, like you said, Miami's not a good football team.
Right.
So Penn State would win.
Not a good football team. Penn State would win that game. Look at Pitt.
Oh, boy.
All right.
You mean Akron.
That's right. Miami just lost to Akron.
How about that? They lost to Akron. They go 10-0 and they lose to Akron.
That's pretty unbelievable. Wow. The Zips. All right. It's 9 o'clock. I can't believe it. What do you got? What do we still need to talk about? I mean, a lot. But what can we cram in here? Greg Schiano?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about that. That was just really bizarre. I actually really feel bad for Greg Schiano. The fact that he had the head coaching job at Tennessee taken away from him because of he was at Penn State, I believe, when some of the issues, when what happened with Jerry Sandusky, he was there. You might know the story a little bit better than me, but essentially it sounds like Tennessee fans were upset that they hired him, and I think that they were upset because they hired Greg Schiano, and they wanted better than that from a football standpoint, and they took it out on the fact that he covers up for pedophiles, is what they said on their rock that they paint on campus. So to me, it's just lousy on their part to cover, like, to pretty much make it
slander.
Seem like that's why that they didn't want him to be the coach when they didn't want him to be the coach, because they still want John Gruden, even though they're not getting John Gruden.
Yeah, and that might be maybe a touch simplistic, but what it comes down to is the Greg Schiano thing was here until 1995, and in Mike McQueary's testimony, he said that he heard from Tom Bradley, who said that he had overheard from Greg Schiano about looking quote-unquote white as a ghost when he had returned from what he had thought he had seen Jerry Sandusky doing something with a young boy. Now, Tom Bradley has denied that unequivocally. Greg Schiano has said that he's seen nothing. It was thrown out of the testimony, thrown out of court because it was triple hearsay. And in everything that has come down regarding that situation legally, Greg Schiano's name has never been brought up. What that means, you can decide for yourself. You can go back and read, whether it's the free report, you can go back and read some of the independent investigations done elsewhere. We're not here to parse his legality and his innocence versus anything else that he might have been involved in with that perspective. But legally, there's absolutely nothing there. They've had all the resources, time, and money in the world to follow up upon it. There's been nothing that's come out against Greg Schiano. Clay Travis, actually, I won't say started the rumor, but brought this up, presented it as fact, and it just went from there. Hashtag Vol Twitter. They like to say that they've never lost. Hashtag Vol Twitter. Them as a fan base has never lost a battle, but man, did they just slander a guy. And so for whatever it's worth, we have a statement from Trustee Anthony Lubrano, and as you know, Tyler, he's been very outspoken for some time about this issue. Southern Baptist pastor Rick Warren famously said, "A lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by a majority." My name is Anthony Lubrano, and I am a trustee at Penn State. I believe fervently in due process, no matter how politically incorrect that position may be. Since becoming a Penn State trustee in 2012, I have made it my life's work to review, study, and learn every detail of what is referred to as the Sandusky scandal. I have pored over depositions, attended nearly every court proceeding, and I am now in the process of reviewing all the source materials Louis Freeh purportedly relied upon to prepare his report, which has since been discredited by every legal expert who has read it. We'll say asterisk there. We can talk about that. Or not. That sounds better. I can confidently say that Coach Greg Schiano had nothing to do with the Sandusky scandal. Any stories about his involvement are completely uncorroborated and without basis in fact. To impugn Mr. Schiano's character based on hearsay alone is irresponsible and unfair. And then he goes on to say it's disappointing that the Tennessee officials have been influenced by the voices and keyboards of grossly uninformed social media mob. So, for whatever that's worth, and you may also know Lubrano as Medlar Field at Lubrano Park, home of the Penn State baseball team, as well as the State College Spikes in the New York Penn League, single A affiliate of, I believe now, the St. Louis Cardinals.
It is St. Louis Cardinals.
It used to be the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Why would other schools have hired Schiano for jobs if there was something wrong with what he did at Penn State, and that's the thing that I don't get. So obviously they wouldn't have, and they did. He's at Ohio State right now. He's a defensive coordinator at Ohio State. So why would Ohio State hire somebody that had, baggage at Penn State? They wouldn't. That's the answer. So to my point, Tennessee is upset. Their fan base is upset that they originally hired Greg Schiano, and they thought that they should have gotten more out of that. They're obsessed with John Gruden. Whether or not that is realistic, probably not. But they wanted something better in their eyes than Greg Schiano, and they found out that's how they handled it. They made it a personal attack rather a coaching attack, and it's frankly they're really putting a they're making themselves look silly as a fan base and unrespected. And I mean, I guess maybe that's why their football program has been down for so long. But
now who do you hire?
Yeah, now
who wants the job?
Who wants the job? I mean, who would want to walk into that knowing that that's the way they treat coaches there that haven't even stepped foot on campus, and that's how they treat a coach, and he's not even you know what I mean? So, and I hope for Greg Schiano's sake that he can find a head coaching job somewhere because I think he's worthy of it, and I hope that doesn't damage his reputation because it's completely unfair.
Tell you what, it's not going to damage his wallet. I mean,
he's laughing all the way to the bank.
Lawyer up, man. You are entitled to some money after signing that memorandum of understanding. There also might be something in there regarding slander.
$20 million you might be getting.
Wait, what's that from? What's that?
From the contract. They might have to pay
Really?
it out. Yeah.
No way.
Tennessee, yeah.
Even though he didn't sign the final contract?
I kept seeing $20 million.
Wow.
$20 million.
In some regards,
in some regards, it kept popping up. $20 million. Greg Schiano.
Not bad.
So
I'll take it.
Laughing all the way to the I would take it too. So, I mean, he'll be. I think he'll surface somewhere though.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin back to Tennessee would be mighty interesting.
Did you see that they put that on the rock?
He would go. He would go back.
Wouldn't that be something?
That'd be funny.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, also on the coaching and Jimbo Fisher rumors to Texas A&M are now really picking up speed.
Yep.
So
is that a better job than Florida State?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're. It all depends on Texas, I think, and what Texas can do. I think Florida State really only had one bad year, and that was this year. I would probably stay at Florida State. I think the ACC is a little more easier to navigate than the SEC West. Mm-hmm. If he has Texas roots, maybe that's why he'd be interested in going back. I guess you never really know the relationship between a coach and the administration and the boosters, so it's hard for me to say. I think I'd probably choose to stay at Florida State, but that's not my choice. So, and obviously there's going to be some more moves, but for now that's the big news.
Got a shout from Greg Green here. Wisconsin gets no respect because of the division they play in. College Football Playoff Committee wants Alabama in the playoffs. Any slip up and they are in. You know, I actually don't think I disagree with either one of those statements. But the issue is Ohio State has also been the beneficiary of things as well. So if it comes down to Alabama or Ohio State, as Reese Davis said, how do they win? They can't win in that situation. Somebody's going to be upset. I'm just going to be upset if it's in 13 data points, and actually the first 12 data points of the year, if Ohio State had one extra loss and Alabama gets knocked out as a result. That would be tough for their sake, especially since they didn't have to play that 13th game last year. The loss by 31 points for this Ohio State team versus Penn State last year. For Ohio State, it happened in November. For Penn State, it happened in mid to late September. I think those are all differences.
Sit back and enjoy.
It's not ancient history, that Iowa game. It's ancient history, which we need to remember. But that's all I got for tonight. What about you? Parting shot?
No, I'm really just looking forward. I think it's going to be an action-packed Saturday of football games. Even if it is all chalk like you predict, I think that I think the games are still going to be tremendous. And championship weekend, college football is by far one of the best sports weekends of the year. Starting on Friday night, don't forget, out west in the Pac-12, and then you got a full slate on Saturday coming at you. So enjoy the day, and I don't know when we'll be back again.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. You know this better than I do. You got better plans for this than I do. What do we got? What are we doing here? What's our plan moving forward?
I think the best move is to do a little bit of a college signing day and bowl preview, playoff preview, segment. And don't forget, college football has moved up its early signing period. It used to be one day, early February, like the first Tuesday of February.
Yep.
Now it's December 20th through the 22nd. Players can officially sign with a school of their choice.
Obviously, the regular signing period in February remains.
It still remains, but for the most part, this is the first year. It sounds like most of the guys that are committed will indeed sign within those 3 days.
Which gets really interesting with coaching searches and everything trying to be wrapped up by then.
Everything's speeded up a little bit. Right.
Some piece of normalcy all these schools want so that they can get these kids to sign. Audrey Snyder asked a great question earlier in the week to Trace McSorley and Marcus Allen. Both previously were going to go to Vanderbilt, were verbally committed. And they said, had there been an early signing period, would you have signed with Vanderbilt? Again, Penn State didn't sign James Franklin until after the new year. They both said yes. Yeah. They would have been locked in. They wouldn't have been Penn State Nittany Lions, or it would have been a much more circuitous route.
Vanderbilt would probably be playing in the SEC's championship this week.
That could be true. And of course Kyle Shermer, who is Pat Shermer's son, went to LaSalle College High School. What would his role be as the quarterback? Would he be the starting quarterback of that Vanderbilt team?
We will never know.
We will never know, thanks to no early signing period. But it's here this year. All the more reason Penn State very happy to be all settled at the coaching position. Little housekeeping note on our end then. So while we'll take a break for a couple weeks, we will be back talking Villanova basketball. We'll have a weekly Villanova basketball show starting up either next week, the week after. Stay tuned on your Twitter and Facebook. Our Twitter handle is @BobLongSports. You can follow all our programming there. And Tyler, it's been week by week a lot of fun. I know we'll keep this going, so this isn't the end, but it's been really fun just going through the daily and that weekly grind.
And it goes so fast. It really does. Football season, every season seems to go a little bit faster than the previous one. So it's been an enjoyable experience. I'm looking forward to taking a little 2-week break and then getting right back at it for a little recruiting update and seeing how Penn State's going to close out and compared to nationally, and then we'll have a bowl opponent. We'll preview that, and then as well as the playoff. We'll have all that set in stone. So
we've really, really enjoyed the viewership all fall. It's grown every single week. We've loved the Facebook Live. We've loved the Periscope and obviously all the folks following us on YouTube. So thanks so much from the bottom of our hearts. We're not going away. We'll just come back in a different form, talking Villanova hoops next week. And then, of course, talking Penn State football in 2 as we prepare for the early signing period. So have a great weekend, everybody, and enjoy championship week. We'll see you soon.